morning. Are we doing all right so far? Well, that was weak. Come on, are we doing all right so far? There we go, there we go. You know, I've had the privilege of standing up here before you many times, and in the past, I've probably shared with you my weird obsession, love affair, whatever you want to call it, with sports. I mean, I love sports. I love all kinds of sports. In fact, Mikey's got me watching soccer, and I don't know any of the rules. I think I understand offsides. That's when all of them are on the field, right? No, that's not right. Anyway, so I'm still trying to figure out the rules to soccer. I love golf. Oh my gosh. Someone said that you know what you're supposed to do when you wake up in the morning and it's the first thing you think of. And I'm like, that's awesome. I should be on the PGA Tour. Because that's all I think of. Every morning I wake up and I'm like, maybe today's the day. And then I realize I'm not good enough. But I love golf. I love football. I'm telling you right now, if there was a competition of two guys flipping a log and there was a starting line and a finish line, I'd watch it. Just for competition's sake, like, oh, great, two guys are flipping a log. Some of you are shaking your heads, so there is a competition to that. Okay, see, I've probably seen it, and that's why. In fact, if the log flipping tournament isn't even on, I'll even watch baseball. Sorry, I just can't get into it, man. And I know you're saying you watch golf but not baseball. I know, man, I'm a hypocrite. But I'm trying, you know. But I love sports. Now, for you who do not like sports, I don't want to lose you in the first 5 minutes of this sermon. So here's what I want you to do. We're going to come to the train station. I'm going to let you off for just a second, and then we'll swing right back around and get you, and we're going to get on this train, and we're going to finish strong, okay? So if you don't like sports, just hang on. I'll swing back around and get you, and then we'll move on. But I love sports. Now, for you who do love sports, like it, whatever, how many of y'all have ever found yourself rooting for the underdog? Okay, we're in good company. I'm talking the guy, the team that no one has given a chance to. I mean, they're like, this guy has no chance. This team doesn't even deserve to be on the same field as this other team. And I find myself rooting for the underdog a lot of times. But there are times where I root for the favorite. I want the best team to just plow over the little guy. I mean, that's wrong, right? I mean, I just want the best team to just beat them by 40 if they can. And if they beat them by 45, you know, you should have stopped us. I mean, I'm just saying, you know, score a touchdown with 2 seconds left when you're already up by 60. Why not? It's their job to stop you. And I know that's not a popular way to watch sports, but sometimes I like to watch the favorite win. 2 Saturdays ago, we got to see history when American Pharaoh won the Triple Crown. The first time in 37 years. Now, I got to be honest with you. I wasn't rooting for the underdog. I wanted American Pharaoh to win. I wanted to see history. And sometimes when you root for the favorite, it kind of throws you a little life conundrum. You're faced with this conundrum of, oh, man, I'm not crazy about that team, but if they win, that's historical. Case in point, back in March and April, we were faced with that, and there was a team just south of the river that was looking to make history. And they had gone undefeated through the whole regular season in college basketball. Got to the tournament and just started winning and winning. And it appeared that this team would make history. And there was this part of me that's like, man, this would be the first time since the 71 Hoosiers to go undefeated and win it all. And then I thought about Kentucky fans, and I'm like, no way, go Wisconsin. Sorry. If you root for Kentucky, I'm just kidding. And Kentucky Wildcats fell just short of an historical feat. But see, there's something within us. We want the little guy to win. I mean, we are kind of predisposed. We love a feel-good story. We're talking the kid who has no chance in life, no chance at being an athlete, and this kid finds himself just seconds away from a championship, or this team. You know, this gets romanticized a lot in movies. Check out this picture. How many of y'all seen this? I mean, what a great feel-good story of an underdog. And listen, do not judge me. I cry every time I watch this movie. That kid runs out on the field. I'm like, that's the greatest thing ever. You know, maybe I could do that. But I'm serious. Like, I love this story. This small kid who wants nothing more than to play for the mighty Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Maybe you've seen this one. I mean, how great a movie. I mean, Gene Hackman's the coach. He's unorthodox. He was this big-time college coach, and he comes to this small Indiana town, and he takes this insignificant town. I mean, puts them on the map, and I mean, they win the state championship. This is my favorite one. Check this out. Oh, man, come on. Denzel Washington, I mean, he plays the part of Coach Boone, and in the midst of high racial tension, I mean, our country was, just fighting amongst ourselves. He takes a multiracial football team and teaches them how to live together, how to play together, and how to win together, and they went undefeated and won this tournament in Virginia, state tournament in Virginia. Man, we love these stories. I mean, we see ourselves in that story. We've seen this played out in real life, too. Check this out. In 1980, a coach by the name of Herb Brooks took a bunch of college players to the Winter Olympics at Lake Placid, New York, and was given no chance. They said this team would not even enter into the medal round. And they go up against mighty Russia in the semifinals and beat Soviet Union, full of professional players, and won that one, and then the next match, and won the gold medal for the U.S. Olympic team. I mean, how great a story. Check this one out. James Buster Douglas in 1990 goes up against Iron Mike Tyson from Catskill, New York. The odds makers had it at 42-1. How many of y'all wish you'd have placed a little bit of money on that? Oh, really? Leave it to the Methodist pastor to raise his hand on gambling? Oh, I see how it is. All right, leave me hanging. I mean, 42-1 odds. And James Douglas knocks out Mike Tyson. And Jim Lampley, one of the great boxing announcers, said it was the greatest upset in the history of World Championship boxing. Check this out. 1990. Going up against the mighty Oakland A's, given no chance to even be on the field with them, a nasty bullpen shuts down the Oakland A's straight off a World Series win and full of would-be Hall of Famers. Now, there's a lot of young people here, and I'm sorry that you have not seen a championship in this town since then. I don't know when. In the future we will either. But I'm telling you, for you who weren't around, this series was over almost before it started. We took a 7-0 lead in the first game and swept the Oakland A's in what many still consider is one of the great upsets in World Series history. And last year, my beloved Buckeyes, with a third-string quarterback and a revamped defense, goes in and beats mighty Alabama and then Oregon Ducks and wins the first undisputed world championship. You say, why do you say all that? Because we like this. It's in our DNA to want the little guy to win. We want the little guy to come out on top. Now, you who didn't like sports, I'm swinging back around. I'm coming to get you. All right, get on board, because now we're going to get into this okay, so you with me? It's not just sports. It's the history of the world is made up of people who have overcome unbelievable odds, who have looked insurmountable odds in the face and looked death or whatever circumstances and have overcome those odds. Anytime you hear a story of what looks to be victory seems improbable, when defeat would appear imminent, when the odds seem too great, you'll hear people say it's a story of David versus Goliath. And that brings us to our story this morning. For centuries, we have told the story of David and Goliath, and understandably, we tell it as the underdog story, the little runt of a kid who defeats the mighty giant. But today, I want to kind of challenge your thinking on that a little bit, that maybe we've been kind of looking at the story all too wrong for so long. A renowned author named Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book, and it's called David and Goliath, Underdogs, Misfits, and the Art of Battling Giants. And let me just say, if you haven't read this book, I challenge you. It's an easy read. It's full of stories. Every chapter is about a different family or a situation that was, just seemed too great to overcome. And even though there were challenges, they were able to overcome it. And it's just an amazing read. Pastor Brent and I did a life group study with this book, and unbelievable book. Well, I'm going to borrow a little bit of language from the introduction, and I hope that at the end of this we can find a simple truth to take from this wonderful story. We all at some time in our life have heard the story of David and Goliath. I grew up in Sunday school. which explains a lot, I know, but I grew up in Sunday school, and guess what? The first story I ever probably heard growing up in Sunday school was the story of David and Goliath. But maybe for some of you, this is a new phenomenon. Maybe this story is not as familiar as other Bible stories. So let me kind of set the scene for you. Israel was at war with this group of people called the Philistines. Now, the Philistines were seafaring people, and they were from Crete. And they had one mission in mind, and that was to overtake the army of Israel. They were moving along the coast, and they came into Palestine, and they set up camp along the southern ridge of this mountain. Go ahead and show that picture. So this will give you kind of an idea of what's going on. The Philistines had set up camp in the southern ridge of this mountain, and right running through it is this valley of Elah. Well, Saul, finding out about this, decides, well, we need to counter that, so he decides to come around the north ridge of the mountain, and that's where you see the Saul's camp. So now you have the Philistines on one side, you have the Israelites on the other, and you have this vast valley running between them. And they are gridlocked. No one's willing to make a move. I mean, this is like a standoff as they look at each other, probably shouting at each other, all kinds of things. And here you have this gridlock. And the reason that no one wants to make a move is because by moving down the mountain into the valley, you become just sitting ducks for the opposition. And let's be honest, if you read anything about war times, you know that the high ground is the most valued ground. So you have the advantage as long as you have the high ground. And the other part to that is if you came down the mountain, the enemy would naturally see you and they'd be prepared to advance on you. So no one's moving. Well, the Philistines kind of had enough of this. They're like, all right, this is a joke. We're going to do something different. So they decide to send one of their best guys, their champion, Goliath, and they send him down into the valley. Now, this was not uncommon to propose a one-on-one battle for the sake of the whole two armies. This was not uncommon in these days. And what would happen is whoever won basically meant you won for everyone. It's kind of like when your team wins, we won. Well, I mean, you really didn't win. You weren't there playing it, but you're part of it. You say, we won. And that was kind of the way this was set up. So the Philistines send Goliath. And he comes down into the valley, and he challenges Israel's best guy. And this was the wager. If I beat you, you all become our slaves. If you beat me, we'll become yours. And that was the challenge. And see, as we have told this story over and over and over again, we have seen this as Goliath, this vast giant, is unbeatable. Now, we're going to take a little side detour here, and I want to tell you that in these times, in ancient armies, there were three types of warriors. You had your chariot, your horsemen. For the record, back in those days, it was hard to get them to pose for photography, so just bear with us. I know it looks a little cartoonish, and yeah, photography wasn't what it is today. But you had horsemen, all right? Then you had footmen, hand to hand. And the third group of people you had were slingers, or what we would consider artillery or archery. Now, there was sort of a balance with these ancient armies, and there was this rock, paper, scissors balance. The chariots would defeat slingers because they could overrun them, and they would move too fast for a slinger to really pinpoint their location. The footmen would overtake chariots because with their long spikes, they could knock them off the horse and they would defeat them that way. And then slingers, though, would defeat footmen because these footmen were typically slow, lumbered soldiers, weighed down with a lot of armor, and they were sitting ducks for slingers. Now, stay with me. We're going somewhere. I know you're wondering. We're going somewhere. Just hold on. Slingers were so accurate, it said that they could knock a bird out of mid-flight, out of the air. In Judges, it says that slingers could hit a target within a hair's breadth. Another fascinating thing about slingers is they had actually developed tools back in these days that were kind of prong-like, and the idea was that when someone would get hit with a rock, they didn't want to bury them with the rock in their head, and they would have to take these prongs to pull the rock out of someone's head. Experts have suggested that the velocity of a sling would be like being hit with a .45 Magnum. These guys were experts, and the reason I bring this up is David was a slinger. You see, when David was approached with this battle and this fight between Goliath, Goliath wanted hand-to-hand combat because that's where he was stronger. But David was not going to fight Goliath on his terms. He was going to fight him on his. And folks, slingers beat foot soldiers all day long. We've told this story, and it's captured our imagination about overcoming the greatest of odds. And we tell it this way because, let's be honest, if the biggest, the fastest, the strongest always won, wouldn't it be hard to see ourselves in that? I mean, we need an underdog story. We need to know that sometimes the little guy comes out on top. But I want to propose a couple thoughts on this idea of the underdog, because we've always told the story of David being the underdog. Goliath was huge. We read that in scriptures. Experts have suggested 6'9" or above. Some say he was 8 foot. We don't really know. But he was a tall man. And so what appeared to be his advantage, his height, his strength, and his size, was actually his disadvantage. Medical experts have suggested that Goliath struggled with a condition called acromegaly. Acromegaly is present in people of oversized stature. Acromegaly, if you remember Robert Wadlow, there he is, from the tallest man in the Guinness World Book of Records. He struggled from the same condition. Andre the Giant had the same condition, just to give you some reference of this. Now, acromegaly, the reason I bring this up, acromegaly is a benign tumor that sets on the pituitary gland. And one of the side effects to this is vision problems. It affects your vision. And when I read the story of David and Goliath, Goliath keeps saying some very interesting things. Goliath makes the statement, "You come to me with sticks," plural, which when we read the scriptures, David only had one staff, a shepherd's staff. He keeps saying, "Come to me and I'll feed you to the fowls of the air." We also read where an attendant actually had to lead Goliath into the valley. Now, why does a mighty warrior, a one who has fought many battles and has had many victories, why does he need led to this valley? May I suggest that maybe the world around him was a blur. Maybe the only reason he was going to see David clearly was if David was hand to hand. You see, folks, I don't believe Goliath stood a chance against David. I think David had all the advantages. He was cunning, he was fast, he was skilled, and Goliath stood there as a sitting duck while David struck him with the sling and the stone and knocked him to the ground and killed him. And here's the truth I want to bring to you today. How many times have we come against a trial, an opposition, a circumstance, situation, and we looked at ourselves as underdogs? We thought, man, I can't defeat that giant. I don't think I can overcome that. Can I tell you that, church, we're not the underdog. I know there's times it feels like that. I know there's times where it feels like we don't have a fighting chance. But see, we're not the underdog. And just like with the story of David and Goliath, I don't think David was the underdog. I think David had all the advantages. And I was thinking about this as I was putting this sermon together. Do you know no one's immune to facing giants? I wish we could all go through life and never have to face a giant, never have to face a Goliath. My wife and I faced a giant back in April. As I was putting this together, I asked her if it was okay if I shared this story, and she gave me her permission. And she's actually not here. She's on her way back from Virginia. But I want to share this with you. Because we all face Goliaths. We all face giants. And I got to be honest with you, sometimes it feels as if they're going to defeat us and they're going to overtake us. Towards the end of April, my wife and I were taking the girls out to celebrate. And we went to the Big Greek Cafe in Harrison. And I'm not trying to give a plug for a restaurant, but it's really good if you've never had it. We sat down and the girls were like, "What's going on? What's going on?" They told us later, "Well, we thought we were getting iPhones." Welcome to having teenagers, you know. We set the girls down, and I said, girls, I got to tell you this. If everything goes according to what we hope, at the end of December, we will be welcoming a new member of the Drummond family. Of course, it was very exciting, as you can imagine. That was Friday. On Sunday, I was here getting ready for church, and I started getting texts from my wife. She's like, something's wrong. I don't know what's going on. And I was in the first service running media, and a lot of times what I'll do is I'll start in the first service, kind of get them going, and then about 10 o'clock, Becky will relieve me over there, and then I'll come over here and kind of get things ready for the second service. And I was just getting ready to leave, and the choir got up to sing my favorite song. Beth Carter gets up and she sings, I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. And as you can imagine, I sat back there. I mean, we didn't know what was going on, and all the questions and everything just started. And, you know, our worst fears, it appeared, were coming true, and we were so scared. And I remember coming over here, and I even told the band, I said, hey, can you guys just hang with me? I'm going through some stuff right now. I don't know what's going on. As soon as church was over, I bolted home, and Becky met me in the kitchen, and she said, we lost the baby. And you know, I thought to myself, this Goliath's going to kill me. This is the big one. I don't know if I can recover from this. But what was amazing was as I came out of that, and let me tell you, let me just stop here. If you're a parent, you know this to be true. There is nothing worse than watching your kids grieve. It's one thing for you and your spouse or to grieve, to watch your daughter collapse on the ground. I mean, just bawling. And I remember sitting on the bed, and I said, girls, I said, I need you to know, like, sometimes things just happen. Sometimes natural things just happen, and God's going to get us through this. You know, I used every cliche I could think of, and Brooklyn's like, well, I prayed and that God would make this, that she would have a good pregnancy. Why did this happen? And I'm like, Brooklyn, I don't know. But I said, can I tell you this? I said, Mommy and Daddy do everything we can to protect you from hurt and pain and suffering, and I'm sorry we couldn't protect you from this. I'm sorry you have to go through this. As I walked out of that, and I began to look back at what I thought was a Goliath, what I thought was a giant that would kill me, defeat me, I was like, oh my gosh, maybe it wasn't as huge as I thought it was. It didn't mean it didn't still hurt. It didn't mean that even now it's still raw. Because God showed me something which goes back to our hero of the story, David. In spite of his agility, his speed, his craftiness, his skill, in spite of the giant maybe having some issues that we don't read about in the scriptures, and maybe the fact that David had all these advantages, in spite of all that, David had something that we haven't talked about yet. He had God on his side. And as I looked at this situation with Becky and I thought, I'm reminded of a scripture verse in Hebrews where he says, I will never leave you. Never will I forsake you. Now, I wish I could stand before you and say that God promises to take away cancer, to take away miscarriages, to take away pain and hurt and suffering. But what God does promise, what he did say he would do, is every time we're going through something, he'll walk right here. He'll be with you every step of the way. Look with me. This is one of my favorite scripture verses. Look with me in 1 John 1, 4, 4. 1 John 4, 4, I'm sorry. It says, you, dear children, are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. Church, We're not the underdog. We will not be defeated by circumstances. We will not be defeated by pain. It will not defeat us, because every time we go through it, every time we find ourselves up against it, up against the thing that, man, is the worst thing possible, every time we're going through that, guess what? God is walking right alongside of us. And can I share this with you? Maybe there's times where you don't feel like you can walk. I believe we serve such a good God that he might just pick us up and carry us some of the way. Amen? I mean, God will not leave us. He will not abandon us. And so whatever it is you're going through, the pain and suffering of life, and I get it, it hurts. And if you're not careful, you could allow it to defeat you, but you have been made overcomers. You will overcome. I know in the middle of it, it doesn't feel that way, but I promise you, when you look back on the other side, and it's not to trivialize it, it's not to downplay it, but you'll look back on the other side and think, wow, God really did keep his promise. He really did walk alongside of me with this. And I can overcome it. Church, David was not the underdog. And neither are you. You can overcome. And God will give you the power through Jesus Christ to overcome anything that you come in contact with. You know, Jesus lived our life. He died our death. And he rose for our victory. So that when we come up against something, guess what he'll do? He'll help us. And he'll be right there alongside of us to help us overcome. If you'll just bow your heads for just a second, if we can get the band up here to maybe just sing a chorus of that, Overcome. Because it's in this song, it says, you overcame. You see, church, the reason that we can overcome, the reason that we will not be defeated by the giant, we will not be defeated by Goliath, is because Jesus has already defeated it. Jesus has already won the victory. And we will overcome. I don't know where you find yourself today. I don't know what has brought you to this place this morning. But maybe you've come here with a heavy heart. Maybe you've come here with just a load that you don't think you can bear alone. Church, Jesus has given us all the advantage to overcome. We're not the underdog. We're not the insignificant. God has made us the favorite. And he has said, you will win. You will overcome. However God deals with you, whatever God is saying to you this morning, just be obedient to the Spirit of God and let him lead you in all things. If that means you want to come to the altar and pray, that's great. We always want to give you that opportunity. If you want to sit there in your seat and pray, whatever you need to do as the band sings this song, Overcome, I want you to just realize